Season 2 of the Behind the Mask podcast is proudly supported by Chemist Warehouse. Here at Behind the Mask, we acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the original storytellers and custodians of the land on which we live and meet today. Behind the Mask is a podcast about sharing authentic stories. And in continuing that legacy of storytelling, we acknowledge that we're honouring and celebrating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' traditions, customs and stories. And we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Your office, Josh, vandalised. There was, sort of smashed glass and fire was started.
I saw images of my office front with like a little hole and then a big glass shattering around it, almost like a circle around it. And my initial thought was, oh my goodness, someone's fired a gun into the office.
Everyone goes on about free speech and I go, yeah, do you honestly think what you're reading in social media is free? It's algorithmically perverted. You are getting fed the nasty stuff, the sizzle, the stuff that's designed to make you react, the stuff that's designed to make you stay on that platform for 8 hours a day.
The only time I actually felt physically unsafe was we were at the State Labor Party conference and there was a whole group of protesters that had stormed the building, and I was standing next to the Victorian Premier, and the Australian Federal Police basically said, we might be moving you out of here pretty quickly. And one of my colleagues had already been injured on the way in.
If people feel that left and right working together doesn't work for them, and that somehow they've been forgotten by that collaboration in the middle, their vote will go somewhere far more dangerous, right? So we have a job to explain to you the differences in our points of view, not in a way that's nasty or disrespectful, but we must explain, no, Josh has got a different version than me on some things. That's okay.
I'm Josh Pitterman and welcome to Season 2 of the Behind the Mask podcast. This show is about our diverse and extraordinary guests whose authentic stories have challenged them and changed them. They'll share the tools and wisdoms they use to find purpose, bliss, and a greater sense of meaning to their lives. And together, we'll unpack and ponder some of the more pressing and existential issues facing our society. Get ready to be inspired by the depths of the human experience. It's time to go behind the mask. Political debate is almost as ancient as the human experience. But in a world that is more fractured and divided than ever, where nuance seems lost and our capacity for healthy and respectful discourse seems to be fading by the day, I thought I'd shake things up and see where and how two of our country's finest federal politicians from opposing sides of the political persuasion might come together. I know, it's a crazy thought, but it's time to go behind the mask of Australian politics. And I'm joined in the studio today by Liberal member for Flinders, Zoe McKenzie, and Labor member for McNammara, Josh Burns. Welcome to the Behind the Mask podcast, guys.
Thanks for having us, Josh.
It is a pleasure to be here. With you, Josh, obviously, and with McKenzie as well.
I love that you just call him McKenzie.
Yeah.
McKenzie.
Yeah, McKenzie.
Yeah. Deep purpose or soul purpose is something that we chat about a lot on this show, the seed inside of ourselves that we want to share with the world. I want to know, why politics?
Because you can get so much done. You can actually make real changes and improvements to people's life. I think, over the last 25 years, I've worked in and out of public policy roles, and I can point to things that I've done that are enduring changes that have made people's lives better, made their businesses stronger, made their schooling better, made their apprenticeships better. And you can look back and go, yay, I got that done.
You helped people.
Yeah. And I think, you don't go into politics unless you're used to hard work, right? So it's going to be a 14 or 16-hour day doing either what I was doing before, which was either as a business person running my own business or as an IR lawyer. They're big days. Mm-hmm. And so either, I've helped some business get more profitable or I've helped a bunch of kids get into a trade apprenticeship. So at the end of the day, I just found more return on investment and happier that I'd earned my oxygen for the day doing what I was doing in public policy.
Yeah. So is that something you've always, even growing up, that you've gone, I just want to have impact on other people. I want to...
Oh, yes and no. It's more that you want to feel that you've made a contribution for the day. I think it helps, and Josh probably has a similar story. My mum was a cardiothoracic surgeon who then became a lawyer. She practiced in both for quite some time.
They're really similar.
Yeah, no, exactly.
The old doctor lawyer.
Yeah, the old doctor
lawyer, particularly as a woman, who was trained in the 50s. But, I grew up in hospital wards, right? So I watched her spend every day making people's lives better, literally better. And I remember when I was about 10 or 12 and I said, Mum, all these jobs, they just seem to be, irrelevant and making money and I can't really see the purpose. And I mean, what about your job? And she said, well, I save people's lives. And I said, oh, yeah. Okay, that's a good one. What's another good one?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about that ability to look at the end of the day and go, have I done something better for somebody other than myself today? Ideally, the answer to that question would be yes. And this is a vehicle for doing that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Josh?
I mean, it is. It's the biggest show in town where...
Did you not see Phantom?
Well, I did see Phantom, Josh,
geez,
and it was great. Josh, did you see Phantom? Well, Phantom.
I have seen it a long time ago. Yes.
Well, Josh was the Phantom.
Really?
In my
That's
electorate
exciting.
in the art centre. Yeah. It was.
Wow.
I actually
So he's done her research here.
She's came in armed, ready to go. Just
Well, I knew you were in showbiz, but I didn't know you were a
you
musical
don't know who
theatre.
you're sitting in front of.
No, I don't.
This guy's
Sorry.
extraordinary. Anyway, I got one of the last tickets for that show.
Awesome.
Anyway.
I'm glad you came. Back to the biggest show in town.
Sure.
There's bigger than Phantom.
Well, it is, right?
Yeah,
it's the national conversation. It's the arena where we help shape our society.
Yeah.
And to be involved in politics is unlike anything else. And Zoe sort of touched on it, where a lot of people who come into politics and the workload, the adrenaline, the things that you can get involved in is unlike any other industry. And a lot of people leave politics and you almost see this sort of post-political glow where you leave and you're all of a sudden you're relaxed and you've got time and you're earning a bit more money and, you're doing all of the things
You
where...
can talk about the things that you were never allowed to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. and people feel, you can spend more time with family and all of the things that you can do that politics sometimes puts a lot of pressure on. But it is, for this period in my life, I feel really privileged to be able to be a representative in our national parliament and to be involved in our national conversation. It is a great responsibility and something that I feel very fortunate to be doing this. So politics is always something I've been interested in. It's always been something that I've felt that we need good people trying to participate in it and to practice it in the right way and to help lead our country through difficult conversations. And difficult policy areas, and politics is the biggest show. It is the thing that shapes the most amount of society. It is with a flick of a pen, millions, billions of dollars of resources can go flying in a different direction, and politics is the arena where all of that happens.
Yeah, well, you're talking about great responsibility, really, and that can't happen without really strong values, I think, as individuals, and those individual values become party values that become potentially the nation's values. What are your core values as individuals that you like to bring into your work day, week, month, year, life?
I'll let you go first this time, Josh.
Oh, you're a coward, McKenzie.
No, it's not a coward.
It's already begun.
Yeah. No. This is a really good question, a really hard one to answer. Because it's personal and it's one where I think in any given day your values can really be challenged in politics and you have to try and be true to yourself because there is always this mixture between who are you and what do you stand for and then what do your people that you represent stand for, what do they want? And sometimes it's perfectly aligned and often it's not. So to have a sense of who you are through all of that is really important, but you can't only be for yourself. You have to be for the people who you represent. So I think that's the preface. The answer to the question is, I think a sense of fairness and a sense of truth as well, of valuing truth. I mean, that's something that really is disappearing in politics, that we're entering into a post-truth world where people can say things and do things and put their name to something anonymously and put misinformation out there and use all sorts of different programs to try and confuse and divide. So I think combining a sense of fairness of what's right and what's wrong and what's fair for me and you with a sense of, well, what actually is the truth, and searching to represent it and to say things how I see it is something that I try to do each day. Now that in all of that, especially when some of the political conversations that we've got going on right now, it can be a huge challenge. And even in the last 24 hours, I mean, what some high-profile online trolls are saying about myself and others, I mean, it's so defamatory and so insane and so untrue.
What's been said in the last 24 hours?
Oh, just like commentary about what I stand for in the Middle East and what, who I am. I mean, there's people online, saying how much I want to see death and murder, and I'm apparently I'm supporting the death of children. I mean, it's just the most awful and frankly defamatory stuff that people are willing to say in sort of in the name of political activism, and that's something I think we're going to have a real problem fighting against, this tide of misinformation and this tide of sort of post-truth. How are we having conversations with each other? How are we talking to each other? How are we understanding and asking each other questions when we may not agree with every single thing that people are saying? And the ability to get off your phone and have a conversation with someone, I think, is becoming less and less prevalent, and it is especially a problem in politics because this is our national conversation, and this is the conversation that people are becoming more polarized, more tribal. You're retreating into your own corner, or are you willing to go and find someone that you may not agree with on 100% and ask them questions and have that important conversation? And I think that's something that we all have to try and strive to do, but God, there's some big forces pushing against it.
Yeah. And so now more than ever, and this is a huge part of why I wanted to have this conversation with the two of you, is how do we get uncomfortable? How do we choose respect in discourse over being right or our truth being the only truth? How do we create connection rather than division? Because it should be natural to want to connect, but disconnection or fracture seems to be the MO for a lot of people, and hiding behind this gauze of social media and being able to spit out whatever you want to say it's killing society. It really is. Back to values, because we're going to talk about this a lot, I think, this topic. Back to values, though. Yeah. Zoe, what are sort of your core values that you feel like you bring in?
Well, so obviously there's a lot that you bring in from your own life experience and your upbringing. And I think also we get to bring, at least in my case I get to bring the values of the part of Victoria that I represent. So I represent Flinders, which is the Mornington Peninsula, and you guys would both know the area well. It's basically a collection of country towns. There's still an enormous amount of civic spirit, resilience, trust. It's a very kind place to go back to whenever we're not in Parliament. So, yeah, you'll have the rough and tumble and the sizzle of Parliament and politics and all the rest of it. But then I go back to a very restorative place in its not just kindness, it's resilient and self-reliant, and it just gets on with things, and wine and sea and hills. But it's a good place to represent. If you bring those qualities with you, not only are they comfortable in my own gut, they are comfortable because I'm talking about the people I represent. So,
and maybe that's why you represent them.
Maybe, yeah.
I think probably because innately your values align with the area's values.
It's an enormous relief, actually, to get home from time to time.
Because, geez, if you weren't resilient, you were a nasty piece of work.
Yeah, and look, I think the points you were making about social media and trolling and stuff, look, I think the problem we have is that the system currently promotes the nastiness or the sharpness or the sizzle.
You mean the algorithms?
Yep. Yeah, so the system of debate, and it's the same with journalistic endeavour. You know, we seem to think that traditional journalism is saved from all of that. But I learned the other day, some journalists get paid on the basis of the number of clicks they get through to their
course.
articles.
Yep.
I didn't know that. I thought, oh God, that
So you're going to create things that are going to draw the reader's attention, and they're generally, things that are fear-based. We've seen that.
Well, just they're sharp, right?
Yeah,
So
they're sharp.
that looks, interesting because it's sharp, it's puffery, whatever.
When I talk about fear, I talk about it as the opposition to love.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
okay.
opposition to connecting. It's something that creates disconnection.
Yeah. Okay, well, I would just refer to that as sharpness. So
Yeah.
that surprised me. I thought, because I thought journalists were still, just writing what they perceive to be truth as opposed to what they perceive to be getting attention. Because once you make it about attention and sizzle, and we always talk about the difference between question time and the rest of the working day, right? Question time is huff puffery, it's chest beating, whatever. The rest of the day is pretty constructive. Yeah, we still disagree, but we disagree in a very constructive way. Whenever I go see school kids, I talk to them about that collaboration across the parliament, and they go, "Do you know the Prime Minister?" I go, "Yeah." And then they ask you if you know all these other people. I go, "Of course." We're locked up with each other 4 days a week in these parliamentary sitting periods. And there are people of great integrity on every side. So my approach is find the good ones and make them your mates.
Yeah,
wherever so occurring, right? I mean, you want good people in politics. And so focus on the good bits.
Yeah. I think that is
really,
really, really sound advice. So on this topic of trolling and social media, obviously we've talked about this rise in division and fracture. What sort of bipartisan conversations might be happening that we're not so aware of behind closed doors? Because this is a major, major issue within society, and it's shaping people's perception of truth, as you say. What's can be and is being done to sort of rein that in and bring people together rather than seeing the social media version of the world separate?
So I sit on the new social media joint parliamentary committee. So we're actually looking at some of these issues, and that's a good committee, good spread across both Senate, House and all colours of the rainbow in terms of politics. So that won't solve all the problems, but it hopefully will enunciate a lot of them, right? And insofar how some of the sharpness you've seen elsewhere is permeating into the Australian discourse. But we'll look at it in terms of, media and media's access to social media platforms, but equally what's happening to young people, what they're being exposed to online, but also what it's doing to the average 14-year-old's operating model, right? When you sit there with your face in front of a screen for 8 hours a day, which is the average now, right?
8 hours is the average.
Kids are spending 8 hours a day for entertainment purposes, not school purposes, online.
You've got 8 hours of sleep. Hopefully, 8 hours. How many hours are you at school? 9 till 3.
Yeah.
There you go. There's another 6.
Yeah, it's basically they get home and they stay online till whenever, and often through the night. I had Frances Haugen come down to my electorate. We spoke with all these beautiful kids in Year 9. We asked them about their experience. We said, what do you do with your phone at night? And they just look like, it's in my bed, of course. Like, where else would it be? And we're going, oh no. So look, that will at least be a proper debate and take the temperature of where things are at in Australia. Other simple things like, God bless Josh, I don't go on X, I don't go on Twitter. It's a cesspit, mate. I don't want to be anywhere near it. Like you get enough honest feedback from people around Australia about how you're performing as a politician. You do not need to go into that forum as well. So I just try and avoid the worst part of it, frankly, because it's nasty.
Yeah, X can be a dark place.
Yeah.
Or Twitter.
It's a very dark place. Are there ideas that you guys have that you feel might shift and change, and ways that you think we can, ways that we could lead that reteach society to engage in healthy discourse?
Give people capability, right? So everyone goes on about free speech, and I go, do you honestly think what you're reading in social media is free? It's algorithmically perverted. You are getting fed the nasty stuff, the sizzle, the stuff that's designed to make you react, the stuff that's designed to make you stay on that platform for 8 hours a day. Right?
And it's going to give you more of what it's feeding you if you're enjoying that or if you're engaging in that.
The longer you're staying, the more it's going to give you the same thing. Reset Tech, a really interesting public policy think tank in technology, did an experiment for me, and I said, just, if you go online and you watch some Jordan Peterson stuff, how long is it until you maybe hit some Andrew Tate stuff? Well, the answer is 58 minutes.
Really?
If you start watching and listening and liking within 58 minutes you are – actually, no, I think it might be 70 minutes. Sorry, 70 minutes you are full-scale, 100% Andrew Tate videos on Instagram. Okay.
Wow.
Great. So, recommender systems, autoplay, algorithms, none of them are friends of free speech. None of them. So
they're friends of indoctrination.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what you need is to have an option, and some jurisdictions are experimenting with it. So the EU, you can opt for an algorithmically free, otherwise known as chronological Facebook or Instagram that we had when it was first invented, so that you do see your mate's posts from this morning or last night or whenever, as opposed to drivel, and then occasionally something of your friends to keep you on the platform. So,
and who has the power to change that? Can we create legislation?
So the EU has legislation to demand an algorithmically minimised or free version of social media platforms. And are we talking about that here? We will, in the context of this social media inquiry, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic policy.
So the EU's been a little bit crazy brave in terms of its digital regulation, both in terms of digital services, including the social media platforms, and then more recently in terms of AI. Yeah. And once you've got a bit of proof in the pudding to see that it's actually worked, then it might be something we can look at. Because you can't go rogue and do it just here. We're a market of 26 million people, and it's very easy for your Facebooks and your Instagrams and others just to say, yeah, we're not going to play in your market. Or TikTok, right? So it's easy to, we are the size of a US state, basically, so it's quite easy to just say,
I question whether it's crazy, whether it's just brave, because crazy is in some ways, in my opinion, the opposition of normal. And this is what we're dealing with is not normal. Yeah. It really, but we're normalising it. It's becoming the normal for a 12, 13-year-old to be fed divisive information and to be refed till that becomes the plant that's growing out of their
So it's really interesting actually in that point. So Facebook I found, Josh and I went to Israel together at the end of last year, and I found anything I put on Facebook or LinkedIn was fine. It was met with questions but not hate. Instagram and TikTok, wow. And then X, I imagine will be something, but didn't look at it. Just the younger the demographic was that was on the platform, the more violent the response. And I just thought, wow, okay, something interesting is happening in 16, 17, 18-year-old land that is not happening in 50-year-old land. Yeah.
I think, isn't the anecdote also like get off your phone? A bit of it. I mean, this is the really difficult thing that a lot of people are struggling with is how do you put down your phone? I mean, we are addicted to it.
It's so addicted. We are all addicted to it.
Yeah,
I hate it. I hate how addicted to it I am. But I need it for my work, but then I go, I'm using it, I'm not needing it.
Yeah.
But you guys like doom scrolling on TikTok and Instagram? Because I've been doing that. I just read the newspapers. Yeah.
Of course not. And I'm generally putting out content that I think is having an impact in a positive way in society, and I'm actually getting fed more of that, which is interesting too. I get inspired a lot by what comes up on my feed. So it's algorithmically positive for me, but it's not always.
Great recipes on there, right? I like the cooking stuff.
I get a lot of sort of self-helpy stuff or that kind of stuff because that's, I guess, what we're putting out here with the behind the mask content. So it's interesting. Hey, we spoke about Israel and division and violent stuff. We can't miss this topic that we were supposed to come in and have this chat a little while ago. And the morning of, I get a call from both of your offices to say that your office, Josh, had been brutally vandalised. There was, sort of smashed glass and fire was started. And obviously it was, pro-Palestinian activists assumed to be because there was graffiti over your face saying Zionism is fascism. It was really full on. And I just thought you handled that, Josh, with such calm, such grace. You were so balanced because, I take a real interest in politics and take a real interest in your journey, Josh, and I just thought you were wonderful.
Thanks.
But how did that make you feel?
I mean, it's been a journey. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I remember the first my phone started blowing up at about 6 o'clock in the morning on the day we were meant to do the podcast, and and I saw images of my office front with like a little hole and then a big glass shattering around it, almost like a circle around it. And my initial thought was, oh my goodness, someone's fired a gun into the office, and there's bullets. That was where I first went. And then I said, well, let's find out exactly what's happened. And in the end, it was a hammer. It wasn't a bullet, thank goodness. It was a pretty emotional and distressing day. I mean, the office was intense. I mean, walking through it, there was red paint everywhere. But also, I mean, my staff have been, and Zoe will know this. Like, our staff they're there to support us. They have to, you have to kind of go along with what the member of parliament decides and what politics they get involved in. And I had conversations with each of them because most of them have no connection to the Middle East or even the Jewish community, really. I mean, they're just young progressive people who wanted to work for the Labor Party. And I said to them at the start of their employment, look, it's not really something why I'm in politics, but there might occasionally need to be moments where I'm involved in Middle East politics. Are you okay with that? And everyone, they were all like, yeah, it's fine, no problem. And then since this latest round of war has happened since October 7 last year, it's been an overwhelming experience to be a young political, employee in Australia, where you've had, you're constantly getting phone calls telling you, all sorts of different things, and screaming at my staff. And today I'm going to a lecture at Melbourne University. I've got to have a full police escort. I mean, it's unheard. I can't believe it's just so bizarre. But my staff, I think that day felt like this. I mean, this is their place of work. This is a lot of young women and students, and they're just great people who didn't need this at their workplace. So I felt really bad for them. And
have you felt unsafe?
Look, it's a strange question. It's a good question. No, I haven't felt physically unsafe. The only time I actually felt physically unsafe was we were at the State Labor Party conference, and there was a whole group of protesters that had stormed the building, and I was standing next to the Victorian Premier, and the Australian Federal Police basically said, we might be moving you out of here pretty quickly, to the Premier, not to me, but I was standing next to her, so obviously
it includes you.
Included me, and I also knew that in that room, for whatever reason, I would have been I'm quite big anyway, and I'm often a meeting point in these sorts of environments. But I knew that would have been potentially uncomfortable. At that moment, I thought, this is potentially going to get out of hand. And one of my colleagues had already been injured on the way in, and there's been other incidences where staff members of MPs have been injured or assaulted at ordinary gatherings. And I think that all of this is sort of leading down a really worrying path. And we have to be really mindful that if we don't bring the temperature down, then something terrible will happen. And so I guess the discourse that we all have and the way in which we conduct ourselves in these debates is crucial. And I felt like when my office was attacked, I could have come out and inflame tensions, but actually I'm really worried about that, and I'm really worried about what that would mean for Australia. And I don't want to make it worse, because I know how it feels, and I know what it felt like for my staff. So to me, it was the only option that we could do, was to try and think about, well, how are we going to come across in this moment? How do we try and remember that actually we're all people. We're in Australia. We're not in the Middle East. We have limited ability to have influence over there. What we can do is think about, well, how are we talking to each other? How are we respecting each other? And how do we want to move forward as a collective society in this moment? And so that was my approach. And yeah, unfortunately, I think there's still a little bit of a way to go.
There is a way to go, but it takes moments like that and leadership like that, people like you, to come out publicly and communicate in a way that is accountable and responsible and does, calm the waters, and ultimately shows or re-establishes the multicultural values of this country. And they are values of nuance. They are values of difference and of accepting difference. And, we've talked a lot about social media and how that is having an impact on bringing the tangent points further and further out and wider. But there is all this colour in the in-between, and that's where the beauty of nuance lives. So you can be, I can put my hand up and speak for myself in this, I am pro the state of Israel. Yeah, but I'm not pro some of the behaviours of what's happened with the IDF and Netanyahu. I am pro-Palestinian people having an opportunity to live their life with freedom and not be killed. And I am pro those innocent kibbutz workers not being slaughtered in the way they are. I'm pro-peace and pro-love and pro-life. And that should not be a utopianism in society. Like, that happens when we respect each other regardless of differences, regardless of different religions, different colours of skin, different sexual orientation, different social economic status, different capacity in our mental and physical health. This comes from seeing each other beyond all of that.
Yeah.
And we are becoming increasingly incapable of doing that. But words like the words that you had post that inspire that change that's required. And I just, I said at the top of this question, but I just thought you were brilliant, Josh. So thank you for that.
Very nice of you, Josh.
It was great leadership. On the topic of leadership, who are the great leaders that you are inspired by, be them Australian or internationally or current or previous leaders? Who do you sort of look up to and go, geez, they were good. I want a bit of that. I want to get the juice of them.
So I know when I got elected, and I thought, this is interesting. I thought, I better go work out who the great women leaders have been, just so I work out, how they managed their life and managed all the competing demands, etc. And so I suppose two that I have always looked at. Simone Veil in France. So she was the original president of Europe when it was created. She was an Auschwitz survivor. She had then become health minister. She became a magistrate first, then health minister in the Chirac, eventually the Chirac government. Before then she was with another French leader as well, I can't remember. Anyway, amazing, remarkable woman. Really brave at the time, but not focused on the bravery that she was demonstrating in holding all those roles in what was still a pretty traditional society. France likes to think that it's very avant-garde, but sometimes it's actually very traditional. So she's amazing. And the other one I've always looked at.
The opening ceremony was pretty avant-garde.
Right up there. And the other one that I think is remarkable, albeit with mixed political results towards the end, Angela Merkel. So again, a woman who came from the East, eventually became part of the CDU, so it was part of the conservative branch of politics, and was Kohl's mentee, and then goes on to rule Germany for such a long time. So some of these women I look at and just go, oh wow, okay, you almost make it look easy. So that's why I wanted to kind of go into the details of understanding how they got to be that extraordinary and still completely themselves. They didn't have to sort of chop off any parts of their personality. They went on to have remarkable careers post-politics as well. Veil is one of the most revered French leaders. When I was there once in France, because France is sort of my second home, she was being removed from the cemetery where she was built and moved into the Panthéon, but she went with her husband. So the fact that they took them as a couple, I just love that. I thought, okay, there's something special about who they were as a partnership. Merkel has just resumed her former life, right? Loving opera and being really quiet. You never hear beep from her and you think, okay, that's good too. So
she did what she had to do or felt compelled to do or wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then
I think in politics I've worked for some extraordinary humans. So I worked with Brendan Nelson when he was Education Minister. Brendan's wisdom and empathy for other people would constantly blow me away. And we saw it as director of the War Memorial when he would talk about Australian spirit and Australian courage and Australian performance in moments of war, you know, his ability to capture and evoke emotion is just remarkable. So so he'd be a closer to home example, but yeah.
Some wonderful people there.
Yeah, I think you focus on the good parts of the good ones.
Yeah. Josh?
Well, I joined the Labor Party at the beginning of the Julia Gillard Prime Ministership, and I've now gotten to know Julia a little bit, and she's even more human and lovely in person and intelligent as well.
So intelligent.
Oh, she's very smart. And building on what Zoe said, the sort of example of what life post-politics could look like and how to hold yourself with decorum and grace is, you know, she embodies that. And I think, you know, obviously her time as Prime Minister was extremely difficult, but she is an example of, well, what are the things that matter? She wanted to maintain, you know, that she had the Murdoch press, she had our own people coming at her, she had leaks from within cabinet, and at that moment she reformed the way in which we fund public schools and introduced the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I mean, they're two incredible legacies that a Prime Ministership can be proud of, and she did it at a time where literally the whole world was coming at her. So I have great admiration for Julia. But the other observation I was going to make, which is
just gives one of the greatest speeches on misogyny that the world has ever seen. I don't know whether you got to see Julia at the MTC recently.
I haven't seen it yet.
It was speaking provocatively, it was remarkable, and that speech is recounted on stage, and it's a special moment. I was really teary, and for that moment, I just saw Julia again, and sort of everything that she had to endure to operate the way she did. I think she's remarkable. Sorry.
No. It was MTC is obviously a great McNammara institution.
There we go.
But I was in Canberra for the opening night. I was invited to go, and I would have loved to have gone. A few of my friends went, and they said it was fantastic. But the observation I was going to make about leadership, and it builds on this idea of what Julia was and what she had to endure, is that there is an interesting dynamic going on right now in American politics that also happened in New Zealand politics, where people minimised the possibility of female candidates, and what happened when Jacinda Ardern was a late pivot for the Labor Party in New Zealand before the election that she won a hung parliament, was that it was sort of all of a sudden people reimagined her in a position of leadership, and there was this huge momentum towards her. And for a lot of the commentary around Kamala Harris in the United States, it's been, well, can she do it? Is she good enough? Is she just a Californian Democrat? Can she even win that? We need Biden to hold these states, and then that's sort of been the discussion around is she good enough to win? And maybe she can, maybe she can't. I don't know, but as soon as there was a pivot towards Kamala Harris, who is an eminently qualified person, and all of a sudden she's had she's raised something like $350 million in sort of 48 hours, and the momentum that we're hearing on the ground in the United States right now is sort of, there was momentum for Obama, but this thing's on fire right now for Kamala, and people are so enthused by her that maybe it's enough to win the election, maybe it's not, I don't know, but I do think that in terms of leadership, the persistence to stay and to put your hand up in moments despite all of the things that are coming at you, and despite all of the negative and the narratives that are being designed to bring you down, if she wins this, what an extraordinary moment that will be for American democracy as the first female president, the first black female president, the first multicultural Indian descent as well, but also someone who, frankly, was written off all throughout her time as a vice president.
Given no real airtime. I think she had one moment that I recall where maybe she said something around immigration that didn't land as well, and I sort of feel like if a guy said that, dealt with the same thing, he still fronts up the next day. It felt very much like let's push a woman down. And let's push a black woman down.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad she's had the opportunity to rise up. And it says so much that, she's raised that much. Whatever your political persuasion is listening to this, I know I'm probably speaking to an echo chamber, but anything to keep the wounded ear out. I sort of, my fear is great for the world with that. We've talked about some leadership qualities, core values, maintaining authenticity, all of these things. How hard is it to keep that as your modus operandum, as your MO in politics when it's, when there's the power struggle and the desire to stay relevant, the desire to hold your seat every few years? How do you keep that integrity?
Look, in my case, I think it helps that I've gone into this older. So I think I was 48 or 49 when I was elected. And so you're pretty much fully formed by the time you go in, which means, your human characteristics, your values, whatever you want to call them, they're not really malleable anymore. So I don't feel that much gets tested. I'm also pretty determined about doing things the way I feel is right for me. I don't question my judgment too much. And also because I have worked in Parliament on and off for 20-something years, I've got good experience and have seen a lot of history happen in that place. And so I'm not second-guessing myself so much.
Yep.
I think back to things like when we had the marriage vote, and that for 10 years that marriage vote didn't come forward, and people like Penny Wong and Julia Gillard had to defend not changing the law. Like they must have been screaming on the inside, right, based on their own experience and who they are and how they came into the place. We haven't had a test like that in the Parliament in my time. I was working in the Parliament at the time. We did have the marriage equality vote, but, by then I felt like there was a great sense of momentum across the country for marriage equality. So I didn't see it as something where I thought people were behaving oddly, right? I just thought, yay, this is going to happen.
And 7 years on, it's almost like, really, we had to go through that whole process? We had to deal with a plebiscite?
That is true, right? But it was a great result. So in a way,
a great result in terms of it's so hard for that to change now.
But I think also people don't question it now.
No one questions it. But I think it's really interesting what you said about Penny and Julia having to sort of, speak in a way that doesn't uphold their... Yeah.
And on my side, we have lots of gay men and women in our parliamentary ranks, and most of them are now, I think, married, actually. So, it's welcomed on all sides. But I think, I look back to those earlier conversations and decisions and I think, wow, that would have been particularly hard for a number of people. And I know that I have not yet been tested in that way from a parliamentary vote or decision perspective. And, the good thing about my side is we're allowed to cross the floor if we feel it's a important thing either for our electorate or our own values or, the people we represent. So
how did you go on the recent referendum?
On The Voice?
On The Voice.
Yeah, so I spoke early on The Voice and that was after sitting down with Indigenous representatives in my electorate, also with constitutional lawyers. I'd been a very avid constitutional lawyer both at university and then afterwards. Greg Craven had been my mentor for 30 years of my life, and obviously Greg, together with Julie and Lisa, who are both very dear friends to me, had been extremely pro The Voice. Mark texted Tony Nutt, they're very good friends. They were all leading the Yes campaign. But I couldn't in my heart trust that the words as drafted were not going to cause chaos at a later time, right? And everyone said, oh, no, you don't know anything about constitutional interpretation. Well, guess what? We had NZYQ a few weeks later and it threw the immigration system on its head. The High Court does regularly review its jurisprudence on things and does occasionally change. The case I referred to in my speech was the engineers, when until then we had been a states' rights country. And then we had one case in 1920 and we became a Commonwealth first country, right? So that all laws were interpreted to give the broadest meaning possible to the Commonwealth powers versus the state powers. It happens often. Right? That's what I feared would happen with the words as drafted.
So it wasn't about the issue.
It was a major constitutional
It was about the specificity around.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, some of us were saying, you can change the words here, right? You can take away the doubt. You can make this a safer vote for people, but there was no appetite for compromise.
Very interesting perspective, because I don't come across many people in my circles who voted no. And I've had a good chat to George Brandis once about his vote, and he had a very similar opinion, and that's sort of what I'm harking.
And I've worked with George. George is a dear friend, so yeah, we're constitutional dogs together.
We're into quote time now, segment time. Did you guys happen to bring in a quote?
Yeah.
You've got something?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Josh?
Well, actually, this is an anecdote that my staff are going to hate, but I originally wanted to say a quote that we used to have in the Premier's office when I worked for Daniel Andrews, but they think there's too much innuendo in it. So
you're going to have to spit it out.
What kind of innuendo, Josh?
Well, so the quote we used to have in the Premier's office. This is not the quote that I'm submitting. This is an anecdote before the quote.
Okay,
but
you're doing two quotes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but the quote we used to have in the Premier's office was "Hard things are hard," right? Like they are, and to do hard things, it is hard. But that my staff thought, no, that's too risque potentially.
That's because it's a sexual innuendo.
Well, I don't.
Well, it's like a similar
we
quote.
We didn't talk about why. They just said, don't just avoid that. Don't bring that up.
Well, it's like choose your hard. Like sitting in front of the TV all day and not having the capacity to, or in front of the phone, and what that brings up for you can be really hard. And also, choosing to run 20 Ks every day is really hard.
Yeah.
Choose your hard.
Choose your hard. Yeah. Choose your hard. Great. That can be our new quote. Choose your hard.
Choose your hard.
Yeah. But no, the quote that I had was from Billie Jean King, which is that pressure is a privilege, and that you're working in politics, especially in government. I mean, my first term was in opposition, and then we formed government in the last election, and there is a different weight to it.
Yeah.
To work inside government, there is a different weight. And the pressure that you feel is on a much bigger scale compared to opposition. But it is, you always choose to have your hands on the steering wheel. And you don't get into politics to be a commentator. You want to drive change and you want to make decisions. And often in politics, you are making decisions where it's 51-49. Nothing easy gets to senior officers. If it's an easy decision, it's made by someone, very low on the food chain.
Yeah.
As soon as it starts rising through the ranks, especially when it gets to a level of prime minister or president, they're the most difficult decisions that our country has, and I think that to be able to be in that position where you make these decisions and you do your best, that's why we get into it. But there is a weight to it, and you do feel the pressure. So pressure is a privilege.
I love that quote. I'm harking back to so many times in my life and career and performances where I felt pressure and that stress or that anxiety that comes with it. Like a lion gets really anxious before trying to nail down a zebra. Like it means that there's something really, really important at stake. Yeah. You care really, really deeply about it. And that's where that internal pressure comes from, beyond the external pressures. How do you go about handling pressure? What tools do you use? What sort of functional things do you put in place to deal with pressure? We talked about how, what you had to deal with your office recently and calming the waters there. But there'd be so many moments. Both of you, let's open this up. Yeah. Like, how do you guys handle pressure? Like, yeah. So he's just given eyes.
I mean, there are we're all human, and there are days where you do it better than others. But I think it's like anything. You have to look after yourself, and you have to fuel yourself in a way that keeps you healthy. And if you don't look after yourself, then no one else will. So, for example, on a parliamentary sitting day, I don't do breakfast events. I exercise between 7 and 8 in the morning, and I try not to. Like, you can drink a lot in politics, and I try not to drink too much, especially during a sitting week.
Yep.
It just leads you to a place.
You don't make good decisions.
No, and you're also tired, and you feel physically run down. And if you're not, if you're not firing on all cylinders, then you can certainly, I can tell. And so for prior to an election period, I don't drink at all. But it's about doing the little things where you look after yourself, and things like exercise and spending enough time with family and having moments where you actually say, no, I'm not working at this time.
Power to say no.
You have to.
Yeah. Sleep?
I love sleep.
Yeah.
I try and get at least 7 hours a night, and that's usually enough to make me feel rejuvenated. But yeah, spending time where you so Friday nights for me are off limits. I don't do anything Friday nights. I don't work Friday nights. I go and have dinner with my family, and that's having those sorts of things where, this is a time for exercise. This is a time for family. This is a time for good food. I like cooking as well, so I cook good, healthy food for myself. And if you do those sorts of things, then it just sort of builds a little bit more resilience. Because if you don't do those things, then the pressure you feel walking into a room tired, hungover, and after you've just eaten a burger, well,
yeah.
It's all exacerbated.
Yeah, and balance. What you're talking about, you're having balance there, so that you can find the calm waters when the seas look rough and choppy.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of whether there will be waves. There's going to be waves. It's how you choose to surf them.
Absolutely.
And I love the sort of element that you alluded to there, which is a sacred element too. Bringing ritual into life. Like Friday night, as often as we can as our family, it's less now than it once was. But I miss that ritual of Shabbos.
Yeah.
And it's a really important thing. And it beyond anything that's religious, it's the ritual of being with family and having the conversations that family has, and connecting with family and connecting with your roots and your nucleus, the thing that brought you into this world in the first place, Yeah, thanks, Joe. That's great stuff. What about you, Zoe?
So I think, a bit like what Josh said, you tend to have to run your body like you're an athlete, right? In these jobs, you have to make sure it's got the right amount of sleep in it. You can't, I find I can't. I hate dinners, I hate rich food at night because I'm going to be up at 5 writing speeches.
Except at the French Embassy.
Oh, yeah, that was nice. Yeah, exactly.
French Embassy and a side of Gaviscon.
Hey, well, no, maybe. But you just find that you can't be reckless about your body and what you're going to put it through because your brain's always got to be really, really good. You might get up at 10 and you're doing an interview at 12 that you didn't know you're doing. You've got to be able to absorb an absolute mountain of information at any point of the day and get ready to do a speech spontaneously at any point of the day. So you cannot be tired. You can't have slept badly the night before. You can't have indigestion. You can't feel sick, whatever. You just got to be tippy-top all the time. So that means I tend to live quite boringly, really. Like if I'm not in bed by 9 o'clock, I've stuffed up my day, right? So in bed by 9. But often up at 5, and that's just because I'm a morning thinking person.
Yep.
And then if you need to get away from it all, great friends who do not give two hoots about politics are absolutely precious. And then things that were a big part of your life before politics, whether that's your family or in my case, it's my French family from when I did an exchange when I was a kid. You go to France and you just leave it all behind and it's fantastic, right? And you're in your French mode and you speak in French and Australia.
I love that you speak French. Do you speak Spanish and German too, or you study those?
Yeah. So my Spanish is pretty appalling, but I understand reasonably well. And my German was really, really good at one point. I just don't practice it as much. French is the natural, easy to switch into.
But you're one of the few Aussies that is bilingual, but you're also almost quadlingual.
Well, Matthias Coleman used to be there. So I used to have a friend that whichever mood I was in, I could talk to him in the right language. But now he's gone, so I don't really have anyone I can do that with. But it's nice to have that place. It's actually a cultural place you can go and hide that's very different from what we do, and here we are here. So that's lovely as an escape. But also scuba diving for me is really important too. There's something about water and little critters that is just utterly resetting of the brain, and as much of that as you can get into your life, I recommend you do.
Are you a fan of Julia Baird? Have you read Phosphorescence?
No.
No, it's a great book. You know what Phosphorescence is?
Phosphorescence is a really good book.
Yeah, it's that glow that you see in the water
and the shoreline. It all kind of lights up like on Star Wars. It's beautiful,
and it's a book about finding awe.
Yes,
in life and what awe does.
Yes. So scuba diving is just 100% awe all the time. Like you run into a cuttlefish, you will piss yourself laughing until you lose your regulator. There is nothing normal about the cuttlefish. Yeah. And it's great.
Yeah, in a life that is so full on with what you have to do. That human doing is always switched on. All these things that bring you back to the human being.
Yeah, and scuba diving tends to attract really, really interesting humans with amazing outside lives, but they're all we tend to all be introverts because you go down there and you're on your own and it's all really, okay, the battery's restoring. And then you tell each other funny stories about the critters that you saw, and it's visually explosively beautiful, the photos you see of what people have seen under there.
And a whole world we don't get to see.
And then like manta rays or whale sharks. And that,
You've seen a whale shark?
I went diving with minke whales off.
What's a minke whale?
It's like a little whale.
Are they the white ones?
No, they're not the white ones. Minke whales are like little whales that breed in the barrier reef, the ribbons of the barrier reef. And so as one lucky escape from COVID, went up to Queensland and went diving with them. When you sit there, just your little old self with this 8-metre whale going past you in the water, you go, that's it, I'm done.
Perspective, yeah. And so you've dived off the coast of WA as well? Is that where you saw the whale sharks?
No, whale sharks are Maldives. Yeah.
Okay. Just a bit of Maldives.
And
Cash
Philippines.
Maldives. Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah, very special.
Zoe, what's your quote?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So mine would be the Truman quote that I think used to sit on Reagan's desk as well, and I might not get it exactly right, but it basically goes, it's amazing what you can achieve if you don't mind who gets the credit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Put the ego aside.
Well, just get on with it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If you're busy worrying about credit, you'll just not get much done. So credit will come, if it needs to, it'll come, but just get the stuff done.
Yeah.
No.
I like that.
Got some stuff done today.
That's a great one.
I like it.
It's beautiful,
I've got one to throw at you guys.
Yeah.
That
Go on.
It's a big one. It's remember, democracy never lasts long.
Ooh.
It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. And that's from John Adams, who was the second president of the United States. How can we build on democracy? If there's any truth in that, how can we keep democracy relevant? Where does it need to shift? How can it grow?
That's such a good point. Like I've been watching the European and French legislative elections recently.
Yep.
Democracy is thriving in that they've elected 35 parties or something to their National Assembly.
Yep.
But it's ungovernable madness. France is at risk of being Belgium, where they sometimes have government and sometimes don't. Therein lies the problem, which is democracy does not cope well with fragmentation. I'm a party of government person. Josh is a party of government person because at the end of the day, we want somebody with accountability, head on the chopping block for making the decisions and getting them right or wrong, right? So that you can choose this option or this option. What you have in some parts of the world now is just fragmented chaos.
Yeah. Israel's been like that for a long time.
And Germany, some extent too, this Ampelkoalition and stuff where you have different parties that don't normally get along together.
And Italy, there's more elections than days of the year. So,
I think it's a great point. I mean, we have to respect our institutions, Josh. We have to respect our parliamentary and democratic institutions. These are wonderful institutions where at the moment Zoe and I are custodians of offices in. But I truly believe in the Parliament of Australia. I truly believe in the system of democracy where we have people coming together, representing their communities, debating ideas, voting, and trying to get things done and trying to solve problems for the people of our country. And it is a wonderful arena, the House of Representatives and the Senate, but they are institutions that are only as good as the people who are in them, and they are only going to be protected if it is something of value for our society. And I don't know that there's enough civics appreciation in Australia from young people where that sense of, yes, this is how the parliament works, this is what happens, this is where the Prime Minister sits, but also, this is important.
Yeah, it's really important.
This is important. And this is a place where our country and our society is shaped and protected and governed through. And that's something that as you get older and as you participate in society more and more, that I don't like the idea of going, politics, they're all the same. I don't care about the institution. I don't even need to vote.
It's sort of head in the sand in some way, because everyone's vote has power, and we wouldn't have compulsory voting if we didn't think it did.
Well, and we want people to participate in democracy, and I remember Penny Wong once said to me that, people can choose not to participate in politics, but you can't choose not to be affected by it.
Exactly.
And I
also
think,
a great quote.
Yeah. And I think our democratic institutions are one where we all have to have. At the moment, we are the custodians. It is our turn, our time, but that will end at some point. And the next generation of people who come into the parliament and who come into our national conversation, I think that appreciation and respect for our democratic institutions need to remain.
Yeah.
So I think you find if you I do a lot of school. We both would do lots of school groups, right? And at the age of 10, kids love democracy.
Yeah,
they love having a voice. They jump up and down. You can pick the 2 or 3 in the room that you've just turned into politics junkies, right? And so they love it. Something we let that fervour dissipate somewhere in their teens, and everyone becomes a bit, politicians, so uncool. But whatever it is that they love about democracy, we have to keep furthering that, right?
Yeah.
And not dull it. I suspect we dull it with the screens and watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine for the 13th time, but whatever. I think their natural curiosity is vast for democracy and vast for what you can do. And I think particularly in this country, like anyone can be a politician, right? Some other countries, there's a big sort of gap between the elites who tend to go into government and the others. We have none of that here. And so every 8-year-old or 10-year-old in that classroom, wherever it is, should think they may end up in this seat.
Yeah, because they can get into it. They don't need $350 million behind them in order to do it. So on that, ways that we can build or ways that it can be better, does a Westminster system work better when we find ways to have bipartisan agreements and approaches rather than playing party politics? Does party politics get in the way of what the system is sort of trying to achieve in its origin?
Not sure. I mean, I've been around it long enough to see a lot of really good bipartisan stuff. I sit on the Intelligence and National Security Committee. We rarely have dissenting reports. We do our absolute darndest to canvass all the issues and come up with what is in the best interest, the national security of the nation. Right? It's important that committee in particular be as cohesive as possible. Yeah, you don't want division on that sort of a topic. So I see a lot of that collaboration stuff, but we do fundamentally disagree on some things.
Of course.
Right? And so, I remember a school group I did recently with Pete Khalil, and the kids asked us, first of all, because we're both on that National Security Committee together, they said, how does that work? And we told the great bipartisan collaboration story. And then some other kid said, what about this Made in Australia policy? And we just went bananas. Pete gave his version of it's best when the state builds your chair, and I gave the version of, it's best when the private sector builds your chair, whatever. And the kids got this really good representation of where we work together because it's in the nation's interest, and when we disagree because that's our lived experience, right? My lived experience is that if the private sector builds it, it will be more efficient and your money will not be wasted.
Yep.
And so anyway, it was just a good debate like that. So I think I don't see waste in pursuit of partisanship. There's probably some, but mostly it's to make a point about where we diverge in thinking things are done right. And frankly, I feel like I've talked about France too much, but let me tell you, in France they have a very centrist government that's both centre-right and centre-left, and guess what's happened? It's pushed everyone who feels unseen or unhelped by that system to the crazy left and the crazy right. And so that's why you've got this madness there. So if people feel that left and right working together doesn't work for them and that somehow they've been forgotten by that collaboration in the middle, their vote will go somewhere far more dangerous, right? So we have a job to explain to you the differences in our points of view, not in a way that's nasty or disrespectful, but we must explain, no, Josh has got a different version than me on some things. That's okay.
Josh, I know when I asked that question about the Westminster system, it drew a little wry smile from you. What did that provoke within you? What evoked?
I think we need to be able to disagree. Yep. We don't want a central committee of governance in Australia.
Yep.
I mean, we've got an elected committee or an elected board, essentially, which is the Cabinet of Australia, which makes executive decisions about the future and the governance of our country. But they are elected and made up by the people in a democracy. They are not functions of a political machine that is unaccountable to the people that it serves. So democracy is very important, and being able to even question time. People used to say, question time's such a waste of time, and I think the theatre of question time is sort of at times overdone. But the idea of being able to stand in the same room as the government of your country, to say whatever you want to them, to belittle them, to tell them where they're wrong, to point out the fact that they've not made the right decision, and to do so forcefully and freely. I mean, that is an essential part of our democracy. And we don't want a scenario where you can't do that to the government, where the government doesn't allow for people who don't have power to come in and question them. That would be a terrible time for Australia. So I think disagreement is not something that we should be afraid of. In fact, it's something we need to protect.
Yeah, so I agree. How we do it healthily is the key. And disagreement is different to playing party politics, though.
Yeah.
Different for disagreeing for the sake of difference and division and just being devil's advocate all the time, when really we might benefit from agreement.
Yeah.
So it's also not saying that we have to disagree on everything.
Yeah, but I don't feel that we do. But maybe because we do spend 16 hours a day in that building. So we don't – I would not say that politics is about disagreeing for disagreeing.
I'm not saying politics, but I'm saying that there have been politicians, of course, who want to play party politics. Like, they're all human too, and we're going to do things that maybe don't serve you best at the moment. You guys make mistakes too. You're not immune to
But we do get grilled on every single decision, right?
Exactly.
So you got to have a whole lot of facts, figures and life experience to back up your position. If you're just going out there to be disingenuous, you'll get shown up pretty quickly in this job, right? So
and you can tell the people who you disagree with and who you do disagree with well. I mean, Julian Leeser is a good example of someone in the Liberal Party who, he and I have had some I'm the chair of the Human Rights Committee, and he is vehement that we don't need a Human Rights Act. And he and I have had long conversations about it, and I fundamentally disagree with him. But I leave the room every time going, I've learned something new about his position, and I really like Julian Leeser. I always leave the room with that sort of a sentiment. And I think I'm still right, but I really like the guy. And I think that's the Australian people and the theatre of politics. I mean, people make up their own minds about who's practicing it properly, who's being disingenuous, who's being overly partisan, who's creating division and opposition for the sake of it, and who's actually working in the national interest. And I think those people are often obvious in politics.
Yeah.
But certainly there are people on all sides of politics who I admire greatly, not for what they, who they are, but for the way in which they conduct themselves and the way in which they practice politics, the art of it all.
Yeah, and what you're saying here, which I think is wonderful, is that you guys really engage with both sides and all sides, and that you have friendships and you're like, and for the public, they sort of see it like bloody footy teams, where it's just like, you can't, if you go for Collingwood, you can't. Or if you play for Collingwood, you can't be hanging out with Carlton players. Like, it's not like that. Do you think we should be more public with that? Because I know that you copped flack for that photo you took with Jodie Bellier after congratulating her. Yep. Like, from probably a fraction of your party. Do you think we should be promoting more of that, those moments, and going, we might disagree, but we're mates?
Absolutely. And so, it's a teeny tiny voice that does that. And what was interesting was that the response in my electorate was extraordinary, right? Because at the end of the day, they just want people to work together for the benefit of the Mornington Peninsula, right? So they go, thank you. Yeah. And that doesn't mean we won't disagree. Of course we'll disagree, right? And of course I had stood up with our candidate for the previous 2 months, and I will again at the next election, right? That's what we do. And we always explain to people why a vote for us is a better vote than a vote for them. And that doesn't mean you don't respect the people who were there. It was the same when we were in Israel together, and I put up a photo with Joshua standing on I think it was the Mount of Olives.
And I said, flack for that as well.
And I said, proud to stand on and in Israel with this guy. Wow, it was ferocious, the response.
And was the media response?
No. It was the Instagram kind of crowd.
Yeah.
But, and one of my girlfriends rang and said, I think you need to take that down. I said, absolutely not.
And I love that you didn't, because that's going, this is what I stand for.
Yeah.
And it says a lot about, you guys coming in today, this is what we need to see and what we need to value. Josh, I couldn't. I've given you a lot of love today, but I could not throw one at you, and we're going to go back to and it's on this topic because it goes beyond politics. It goes to all relationships. I know that your partner Georgie has very different views on the Middle East issue than you have. How do you cultivate and promote healthy dialogue within relationships? Because you obviously become very skilled at that. But this is something, I make no apologies about what this episode is about. It's about how we can come together when we have differences and have healthy discourse.
Yeah.
That is what this conversation is about. And they might be political, but and this political issue, but they are also in all segments of society. So I want to use this as a sort of, platform for that.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, the two things I would say is that the way in which it's been portrayed by the media is it's almost like you're reading about your own relationship when you're unaware of that's the scenario in of itself. I mean, the way that my relationship with Georgie has been portrayed in various media outlets has been bizarre, to be frank.
Yeah, right.
Like this is the fundamental thing that we, that defines who we are. As if someone who is Jewish couldn't date someone who has said something positive about the Palestinian people. I mean, that notion is fundamentally so wrong.
Have the people not seen Don't Mess with the Zohan?
Yeah, exactly.
This Adam Sandler vintage stuff. Israeli Mossad agent ends up marrying a Palestinian woman in New York.
You can't say I'm a Mossad agent because people will believe that.
I know, they probably will. But if it can happen for Adam Sandler in a film, it can happen anyway.
Well, so I think that the public description of it all was sort of, almost like an out of body experience. But in saying that, obviously we do talk about politics. We're both politicians and we both get involved in politics and it is, we both understand each other's world and we really like sort of debriefing the day and talking about, well, how was your day, what happened and what are the different dynamics of it all. And I think on something like the Middle East, at the moment, what we try and do is just be mindful of the world that each other are in, and talk about it and talk about it in a way that's sort of saying, well, what are you going through? Like, what are people saying to you? Georgie has had some absolutely terrible things said to her because she's with me. And I've had some terrible things said to me because I'm with her about people who make all of these assumptions and have these stories about who are they, and this goes to sort of how divisive this issue has become in society. But in actual fact, I actually think we agree on so much. We both want to see peace. We both want to see people live in stability and freedom and dignity, and we want people to, families to be able to restore their lives, and we want people in Israel to live in safety and security, and we want people in Palestine to live in safety and security. I mean, of course we are. We have a shared humanity. Yeah. And that's something that I think people make all of these assumptions about who you are and who they are and all of this sort of stuff, when in actual fact, we're just people and we're just normal people and
who care about people.
Yeah, and who believe in politics and who are very privileged to be elected and who work in different political arenas. And I think if you maintain that, I mean, it's like any relationship. You've got to talk about difficult things, and but I've never felt like conversations on the Middle East have been a barrier to wanting to spend time with her. I mean, of course not. Like she's so wonderful and so normal and so engaged on an issue and comes on it from a really genuine and nice place, and I really admire that about her.
Yeah. It sort of harks back to the earlier conversation about sort of clickbait and sharpness that, Josh and Georgie have nuanced opinions and see the shades and colours and the in-between and connect on that. It gets 5 views on whatever it is, but Josh is this and George is that. Like,
Yeah.
Of course, that's it's someone made commission on that, but the real story is what you're sharing, and I'm so glad that we give you a platform to share what actually goes on, and I love it.
For podcasts, right? Every time I think, the internet and social media and what's the story of our kids, and they sit there for 8 hours a day, and then I remember podcasts, and I think,
we're real conversations.
If I could cancel the internet and then not have podcasts, would I do it? It's like, no, I'd keep the internet just because podcasts are so good.
Yeah.
Because you can explore things and you can do it in time, and you can still be curious, and you're not necessarily algorithmically force-fed what you're going to think or hear or ingest next. Yeah. You can still be curious.
Well, Jordan Peterson's on the next episode. So, so looking to the future, maybe it's a world with or without internet, who knows. Let's call it 10 years from now. What do you feel like, as a sort of final question, the most pressing things for us societally will be, and how we will move forward and grow as a nation? Let's keep it within the island walls.
So I think artificial intelligence, and in particular generative AI, will just change everything about the world as it operates now. It's a fundamental shakedown of the operating model of everything we do. In my maiden speech, which was in part a response to 2 years of lockdown and what I had seen that do to, my kids, everyone else's kids, but also how progressively, because of the ubiquity of screens, and everyone lost their screen control during lockdown, right? You used to say 2 hours a day, well, then it became 20 hours a day kind of thing. I was worried that kids wouldn't read books anymore. And I think I actually said, what does a place like this become, meaning the Parliament, when people haven't read Primo Levi? And I'm really scared that's a whole lot closer now than when I said it a year or two ago. So if people haven't read George Orwell or Primo Levi or any of the sort of great books about history and thought corruption, where does Parliament end up, let alone where does democracy end up? And AI just makes that so much more likely, right? Because you don't even have to Google search anymore. You just ask the little AI tool what the answer is, and boom, there it is. And it's revolutionising everything from dentistry to landscaping. I had this argument with Andy Lee about whether it will transform Pilates. He's pretty sure it will. I don't think it will. I think Pilates teaching will still be Pilates teaching. But, we will be in a vastly different world in 10 years' time.
So I'm just thinking of Andy sort of AI for the glutes and core.
He swears you can do short spine from a ChatGPT explanation. I say you will snap your back if you try and do it from a ChatGPT explanation. Anyway, dorky, right? I've already said I'm dorky. So I think we're in a really different place, and I'm curious about what that does to democracy as well, because, Josh and I would both read 6 to 8 newspapers a day, I reckon, right? When you just say, hey, ChatGPT, what is this contest about in industrial relations? And boom, well, gee, whatever you get better be accurate and nuanced and detailed and with citations as to where the views are coming from. I suspect it won't.
Yeah.
So that would be the thing that I think is the biggest change confronting us and what it might look like.
Really interesting. Josh?
I would add to it. I think Zoe's 100% right that AI is going to be, the way we manage that is going to be one of the most difficult things holding society together. It will have serious advantages in medicine, in travel, transport. It will mean that we can do things that we haven't been able to do before, and all of that is exciting and important, and it's going to be important for our future and our economic future. But at the same time, when you think about how quickly content can be generated, and especially malicious players generating content, at the moment that's manifesting in ways like fundraising off the back of world tragic events. I mean, Gaza is being used as an AI fundraising tool for scams. The material that gets sent out for scams right now is becoming more and more sophisticated. A lot of older people it's very difficult to tell the difference between what is a legitimate email from a credible institution and what is, a phishing exercise to try and extract your credit card details.
I get one. I wake up with a message every single day on my phone from an 04 number that's phishing for something.
Yep.
Always.
So all of that shows that technology can be used by malicious players. It is today. It will be tomorrow, and we have to be mindful of it. And the world of artificial intelligence is one where there may be a Rubicon or a threshold that is crossed in which case it does become difficult to contain and does become difficult to manage, and that may happen very, very quickly as well. So the world that I think we're going to be living in 10 years' time could be a vastly different one to what we are now. In saying that, though, we all thought by 2024 would be in flying cars and living it like the Jetsons. We're not that far off in how connected we are and the things that our society can do. But the next chapter of Australian democracy and of Australian truth and of misinformation and of credible institutions with accountability and regulation operating in society versus malicious players trying to divide, provide misinformation and trying to create division in society is going to be one where we're going to need a lot of good people involved in politics, involved in government, and involved in all different aspects of society, working hard to maintain the social cohesion that we all desperately want.
And on top of that, we've got a planet to try and keep together,
Indeed.
which is a really big one that we didn't touch on, but to be continued when you guys come back for round 2.
Sounds great.
Josh and Zoe, thank you so much for today's chat. I hope it inspires more great, healthy, respectful discussions, disagreements, and discourse with all members of society. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.